The greatest maritime catastrophe of the 20th century is called an accident. What was it? The godfather of Wall Street and owner of the Titanic, J.P. Morgan, cancelled his trip at the last minute. But why? Did he know more? Did he do it to save his own ass? Meanwhile, his opposition to the creation of the Federal Reserve died during this so-called accident. J.P. Morgan, the Fed, and the Titanic. Did he know more, or was it just a coincidence? To create a good understanding of who J.P. Morgan was and his relationship to the Titanic, we have to travel back in time, to the year 1890. That's when J.P. Morgan strategically reorganized and consolidated financially troubled railroads. Thanks to these actions, he created a perfect environment for international investors like the Europeans. Besides the railroads, J.P. Morgan also played a major role in consolidating the US steel industry, creating the first billion-dollar corporation. By the way, small fact, J.P. Morgan's actions became so famous that it led to the creation of the term Morganization. So now we learned how two near-monopoly industries came into existence. And today, with many more, like Amazon, Microsoft and Meta. But let's get back to the story. We all understand that J.P. Morgan became a wealthy man. But what has this to do with the Titanic? Well, if we travel to the year 1902, we can see that in April of that year, J.P. Morgan's company, IMM, which stands for International Mercantile Marine, acquired the White Star Line. And the Titanic was part of this line. The strategy behind buying the White Star Line was the same as for the steel industries and railroads. Create another near-monopoly market, which was now focused on maritime trade. Just as the Titanic was about to sail to America, J.P. Morgan cancelled his trip at the last moment.
The gentleman from Kansas. The gentleman from Arkansas.
A year before the Titanic would set sail on its maiden voyage, debates started to pop off in American politics about the creation of a Federal Reserve. One of its biggest advocates was J.P. Morgan, the man who financially saved America during the Panic of 1907. To give a short explanation of what happened in 1907, an apocalyptic financial crisis was happening in the United States. And the crisis got largely triggered by a failed attempt to corner the market in the United Copper stock. This attempt involved using heavily leveraged positions and loans from banks and trust companies, which ultimately backfired, leading to a collapse of United Copper's stock price and subsequent bank runs. As I think about it, not much changed looking back at the 2008 financial crisis.
We are going through the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression.
And the COVID-19 pandemic.
Markets across Asia opened in red as concerns over COVID-19 pandemic grew.
But let's get back to J.P. Morgan, because he saw what was going on and played a crucial role in resolving the crisis by organizing a syndicate of powerful banks to provide liquidity and prevent widespread financial collapse. During the aftermath of the Panic of 1907, J.P. Morgan, Wall Street syndicates, US President William Taft and Senator Nelson Aldrich started with creating a plan for a Federal Reserve to counter financial issues in the future. But as always, rich bankers and investors don't get involved unless it's in their own financial interest, which it was by giving them a voice to shape monetary policy from inside the system. Looking back from now to then, it all sounds like checkmate. But was that true, or were there still enemies lurking in the shadows? Well, yes, of course there were. The three musketeers of wealth and power, called John Jacob Astor IV, Benjamin Guggenheim and Isidor Straus. These three names always come up when people discuss conspiracy theories about the Titanic. To be honest, they certainly had the power and influence to swing votes and change policy. These three musketeers of wealth and power, plus the godfather of Wall Street, J.P. Morgan himself, all booked a suite on the Titanic. But as I mentioned before, J.P. Morgan cancelled his trip on the 8th of April and decided to stay comfortably in France, enjoying the croissants and fine wine. But why? Conspiracy thinkers argue that he was part of a plot to take out any potential opposition to the creation of the Federal Reserve. The timing of his cancellation and knowing who had already boarded seemed to strengthen this argument. However, conspiracy debunkers claim J.P. Morgan cancelled before sailing because he had to stay in France to make sure he could transfer his large European art collection across the ocean to the US. And he was also taking health treatments at the spa at Aix-les-Bains. Another small addition, J.P. Morgan did book a ticket on the Titanic's second voyage across the ocean. But he could have also done that to look less suspicious. What do you think? Either way, the Godfather stayed in Europe and the three musketeers set sail towards their own Judgment Day. For all of us, it's not a surprise that the Titanic hit an iceberg and sunk to the bottom of the ocean. Unless we would delve into another one of its conspiracies. But that's a story for another day. For now, let's focus on why the sinking of the Titanic could have created the Federal Reserve. Was that fateful day a judgment day for American and global finance? Newspapers called the Titanic the millionaire special, and its sinking might have influenced millions, if not billions of dollars. And some claim that is because three of America's richest men died while it sunk to the bottom. John Jacob Astor, Benjamin Guggenheim, and Isidor Straus. The so-called enemies of the Fed got eliminated that day. Shortly after, progressive and populist resistance against the Fed inside Congress fractured, the Federal Reserve Act got signed on the 23rd of December in 1913. As we know, politicians get influenced by big lobbyists and donors. Could it be that after Astor, Guggenheim and Straus died, the flow of money towards the opposition stopped, which caused it to fracture and lose the vote? It seems like a strong point, or was it just a coincidence? And what other arguments are there? Well, some people claim that J.P. Morgan's diaries from 1911 to 1912 are unavailable to the public, which is exactly the time frame of the disaster. Another interesting point is that the technical files of the White Star Line vanished during World War II. How could this happen? But also, journalist Senan Moloney theorizes that the fire, which was reportedly burning for days in the coal bunker before the ship set sail, weakened the steel in that area, causing the iceberg to breach the hull of the unsinkable ship. And as cherry on top of the pie, we have the Jekyll Island meeting of 1910. During this meeting, Senator Nelson Aldrich, 2 secretaries, and 4 representatives of Wall Street banking traveled in incognito mode to the ultra-exclusive Jekyll Island Club off the Georgia coast. The cover story was a dog hunting holiday. They were only allowed to use first names on Aldrich's private railcar, and contact with the outside was forbidden. To be honest, that does sound like a group of conspiring men that are about to do something that the public would not like. During this meeting, these men drafted the Aldrich plan, a blueprint for a privately dominated central bank. The official plan for the creation of a Federal Reserve was almost, and by that I mean almost, word for word, the same as the island draft created on Jekyll Island. J.P. Morgan himself didn't attend the meeting, but he was a member of the club, arranged the use of its facilities, and sent his senior partner, Henry P. Davison, to the meeting. More than a decade after the Fed was created, one of the Jekyll Island conspirators, Frank van der Lip, came forward and said,
"I was as secretive, indeed as furtive, as any conspirator. We were told to leave our last names behind us. Discovery simply must not happen."
A lot of arguments were made, and some were stronger than the others. But what are the numbers? How did J.P. Morgan himself and his company profit from the creation of the Fed. Follow the money, as they say. The ship sunk, but what did J.P. Morgan get out of it? Or better said, what did his company get out of it? Because J.P. Morgan himself would die a couple of months before the Federal Reserve got created. As we learned before, J.P. Morgan had some kind of influence in the creation of the Federal Reserve. But what is the Federal Reserve? To say it simply, we should think of it as a safety net lender, plus a national ATM for banks. When banks run short of cash, the Fed can quickly top them up. But how did this help J.P. Morgan, or better said, his company? Well, 11 months after the creation of the Fed, 12 regional reserve banks would open their doors. And J.P. Morgan's firm was one of them. This would give his bank access to guaranteed interest payments and lower interest rates when they want to borrow cash. We saw how J.P. Morgan's firm got a foothold in the new world of finance. But when America got involved in World War I, they would make even more money and get more influence. Because, well, money means power. From 1917 to 1919, the government started selling huge Liberty bonds to fund the war. And New York bankers, including the Morgan Group, would of course lead the sales teams. Simply said, Morgan bankers would sell government IOU notes to the public during the war. The bankers would then earn small sale fees and could later swap the same bonds back to the Fed for cheap short-term loans. These points show that J.P. Morgan and his firm profited from the creation of the Federal Reserve. And they could prove that they had a motive to let the Titanic sink while their enemies were on it. After hours of researching this subject, I've come to my own humbling opinion. That is, that it seems to be a mixture of half-truths, solid motives, bad timing, and conspiracy. I think we can fairly say that the Titanic didn't hit an iceberg on purpose, that it truly was an accident. What I do have to say is that the creation of the Federal Reserve sounds shady as hell. I mean, it gave a lot of money and power to the bankers, which is a big motive on itself. Secondly, the Jekyll Island meeting was hidden from the public and would only come to the light after a whistleblower came forward. If that didn't happen, we would probably still know nothing about it. So my question is, why would you be so secretive of a meeting if it would benefit everybody? To come back to the three musketeers of money and power, Guggenheim, Strauss and Astor, they certainly could fight against the creation of a Federal Reserve, which does give J.P. Morgan and Co. a strong motive to kill them. But on the other hand, it stays in a grey area. There's no decisive proof that they were plotting against the creation of a Federal Reserve. To be honest, I don't think that it matters whether they died or not on the Titanic. Either way, the Federal Reserve would be created, due to its growing support and backing by big banking firms. I want to thank you all for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And remember that history is written in mystery.